As long as there have been games, there have been rules. As long as there have been rules, there has been a possibility of breaking them. Ant Chung is a virtual real estate mogul, owning many plots of land in the MMORPG Second Life, released in 2003. In an interview in 2006, Chung disclosed the company's total holdings, mainly of virtual land in Second Life, were worth more than $1 million real-life dollars. Chung's husband and business partner, Gutcham Grave, was set to host a public discussion about the economics of the game when an attacker, or griefer, assaulted the CNET theater for 15 minutes with, well, there's no way to say this delicately, animated flying penises. This is an example of a phenomenon coined as griefing, and the impacts it has on video games, especially MMORPGs, can vary from minuscule to catastrophic. It's no secret video games aren't only for children anymore.
Oh my god! It's in a rabbit show! Why?
The majority of adults 18 and older, specifically 53%, play video games, and 21% of gamers play daily or almost daily. So here's some questions. Who are griefers? Who is being griefed? And why has this trend of online harassment arisen in certain gaming communities? Griefing has evolved over the years, and strangely, the practice can be traced back to gaming developers, of all people. According to an article published by Ganker, some early game developers would use their power to punish what they saw as player transgression. An example of this is the original Earthbound, which had code that tried to detect whether it was a pirated copy. It would then let pirate players get to the final boss before crashing itself and deleting all of their saves. Griefing comes in many forms, which includes, but isn't limited to, the following: making choices on purpose that cause detriment to other players' game performance, attempting to waste other gamers' time, causing another gamer loss and/or reversing their progress, spamming a voice or text channel to disrupt, harass, or aggravate others, blocking other players so they are trapped in an area, or intentionally trying to crash a server. These are just a few examples of ways a gamer, or, as we've seen, game developers, can grief other players, often in an MMORPG setting. Although these pranks may seem harmless, griefing can have large and lasting real-world consequences. Real-world funds can be grifted, stolen, or destroyed. An example of this is EVE Online, an MMORPG dedicated to intergalactic corporations in which a griefing team targeted in-game corporation Ubico-Seraph. According to an article by The Guardian published in 2006, spending more than a year infiltrating Ubico-Seraph and gaining the trust of its higher members, the Guiding Hand enacted an elaborate heist that resulted in the destruction of the organization's limited edition flagship and the looting of its considerable funds. The damage translated to thousands of real pounds and years of effort. We can see the impacts of griefing in massive multiplayer online role-playing games affects economics both within the world of the game and in the real world. And if solutions to antisocial behavior within these communities can't be mitigated, the video game industry and the video game players will suffer psychologically and economically as a result.
Hey, do you want to do some deep breath exercises? Because you seem to be getting a bit angry.
Morons!
Hey, if you suck some air in now, you're going to suck some air in now. If you can do that for me, please.
Ganker posits, at heart, griefing is about rules. The rules of the game that griefers see themselves as being smart enough to subvert, or the social rules they're prepared to break in the name of getting their own kicks. Rule and game breakers are nothing new to game studies. Using the concept the magic circle, coined by early game scholar Huizinga in the 1930s, games create a bounded space and set apart from normal life. Inside the magic circle, different rules apply, and it is a space where we can experience things not normally sanctioned or allowed in regular space or life. However, other scholars have challenged this theory. According to Mia Consalvo and her recent criticism called "There is no magic circle," the concept of a space apart from everyday life, whether geographical or conceptual, becomes harder to maintain. This is especially true when analyzing the impact of griefing on gamers and their communities. The in-world economics of video games often have real-world economic consequences, especially as more value is awarded to the virtual space. When a fellow player and friend passed away, players in the virtual sphere of World of Warcraft, an incredibly popular MMORPG, decided to hold a funeral in-game for their friend. However, the funeral was raided by a malicious mob that made short work of the mourners, all of whom had relinquished their weapons as a sign of respect. Many developers of MMORPGs have turned to banning griefers, with Blizzard banning over 4,000 accounts in April 2006. Simply banning griefers isn't the solution many hope, however. The act of terminating so many subscriptions and the staff required to man support lines come at a huge cost to the developer. Stephen Davies estimates 25% of customer support calls to companies operating online games are a result of griefing. For a small game, these costs can be the difference between success and failure. For a large game, these costs are a continual drag on the bottom line. The economic consequences of griefing are evident at both the level of the gamers and the developers. Psychological consequences, on the other hand, have been identified from both the perspective of the griefers and the griefed. Researchers have even developed a scale to measure players' antisocial behaviors in MMORPGs, coined as the Grief Play Scale, or GPS. No, yeah, not that GPS. Whose validity has been proven through multiple studies. This study was the first to compile a preliminary personality profile of the grief player. This is important since, as we know, online games have been recognized as containing virtual economic systems that bleed into real life. Since the line is blurred between what constitutes an in-game consequence and a real-life one, we should examine the way virtual spaces are policed and how their rules are enforced.
There are over 7 million people who log on to World of Warcraft. Are you telling me all those people's characters are going to die, and there's nothing we can do to save them?
Yes. And it won't be long before everyone gets really frustrated and stops playing altogether. Gentlemen, this could very well lead to the end of the World of Warcraft.
Virtual world development combines game design and community formation. Designers create social order and rules by which the society operates, essentially writing public policy. With some MMO communities rivaling the population of some small nations, it is barely surprising that some don't wish to adhere to the rules or listen to authorities. In a study published in the Computer Games Journal, researchers concluded that the griefers in this survey considered achievement to be a prime motivating factor, whereas the grief players tended to be motivated by all 10 factors to a similar degree. These factors include, but are not limited to, immersion, escapism, competition, mechanics, advancement, socializing, and relationships. The motivation behind griefers is clear. They're not motivated by in-game achievements, they are motivated by the reaction elicited by their unethical actions. Often, griefing is an exhibition of intellectual or physical power over another player. So, it's important for us to look at who has power within these communities. Video games have a long history of catering to white, straight, cishet men. A great example of this is a PlayStation 1 commercial which aired in 1998, where a white man at the movies with his girlfriend is accused by Crash Bandicoot of being whipped.
You are so totally whipped. I'm Brad. Let's ride a bicycle bill for 2. Then we can go to the potpourri store and then go buy sheets. Would you rather be at home shooting a bazooka or watching a chick fight?
This is clearly a misogynistic advertising campaign targeting young straight men at the expense of women. These demographics still hold much of the power within these digital communities, since they were the ones it was originally created and marketed to. Gamergate, is an evident example of how white cishet males exercise control over these virtual spaces.
What is fueling this misogynistic nerd rage? Why are they targeting marginalized creators with organized harassment campaigns? And what kind of damage have they done?
Topic of discussion today is Gamergate.
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 In the fall of 2014, under the premise that they were angry at unethical game journalists, a lie that persists today, thousands of people in the games community began to systemically harass, heckle, threaten, and dox several outspoken feminist women in their midst, few of whom were journalists. The harassment occurred under the social media hashtag Gamergate, which is still a hotbed of debate and anti-feminist resentment today.
They sent me a series of threats that was so serious that law enforcement got involved, and I actually fled my home for several days. This is costing people's lives.
So this all begs the question, what can be done? How do we mitigate the threat griefers inflict on virtual spaces and communities? Although banning them is the simple solution, it's not a sustainable solution and also hurts the gaming developers' bottom line, which can be detrimental for indie games. Griefers must find a way to have their behaviors changed or circumvented while still engaging with the game. Enacting laws and rules that are compulsory and enforced through meaningful punishment is still far down the line. Just as our society has only recently acquired the conceptual tools to consider cyberstalking and cyberbullying real and punishable acts, the skepticism towards considering virtual crimes as virtually punishable as real harms derives from our still inadequate comprehension of the phenomenon and the technology that makes it possible. Game developer and author of massively multiplayer games for dummies, Scott Jennings, suggests that the solution would come from the players and not necessarily the developers. I expect we'll see more and more self-government. The reason is fairly obvious, if not particularly noble. It's less expensive for game companies to have their customers police themselves than hire people to do it. The trick, and why you don't see it generally, is to construct self-policing schemes in such a way that they don't enable unscrupulous players to use them as tools of grief.
God fucking damn it!
The virtual world as a third place is ever expanding culturally, and this includes social norms. When virtual communities rival the size of real-world nations, there will inevitably be some who abuse the environment and others in the community in the name of exerting power. Griefers may think they cause little harm, but many cause enough harm to induce negative real-world consequences, both economically and psychologically. Griefing is a persistent problem, especially among MMORPGs. However, scholars of the genre generally suggest that self-governance in these virtual spaces is the best solution. It's my hope that in the future, we will have safe online spaces for everyone, and game developers and gamers alike will share in the responsibility of making virtual communities welcoming ones.
Butters, what the hell are you doing?
I got World of Warcraft like you said.
You can't be the dwarf character, Butters. I'm the dwarf.
Well, there's only like 4 races to choose
So
from.
pick another one! I'm the dwarf, you stupid asshole! Log out, create a new character, and log back in!
I like Hello Kitty on Adventure a lot more than this stuff.